Oh my God, hold on.
How many people do you have on view?
At any one time, Shahira, there's something going wrong. 1 second. Let me just try to fix this. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. This is Vikas from a very grey-looking London. What we have been doing over the past year is trying to understand all the different impacts of the pandemic on education around the world. And whilst the pandemic has not gone away, we will still continue to explore this topic. But I want to use this year to actually think about how we actually wrestle all the different issues that have arisen out of it. And actually, I want to have somewhat an upbeat conversation with those that I bring on here about what they see as the potential for change, given the cataclysmic effects of the pandemic. And so when I think of it like that, it's very easy to fall into this rabbit hole which tells you that the only place that matters is London and the UK, where I'm based. And so I'm really glad to have friends all over the world that I can invite to this live stream and discuss various issues regarding education from their countries, so that we expand our knowledge and understanding as to how different systems are dealing with it, and what these leaders believe to be the potential silver lining that comes from it. So today I have with me a friend of mine called Shahira Bazari. Shahira is the managing director of an organization called Yayasan Hasanah. And Yayasan Hasanah is based in Malaysia, and it's the largest philanthropic organization in Malaysia. It actually stems from the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Malaysia. And so what it does do is have this very macro view on all the challenges that and all the opportunities is what I should say that the education sector there faces. And Shahira, being the managing director of this organization, obviously has a vantage position and a view that she can contribute. So welcome to the T4 TV live stream, Shahira. You'll be pleased to know you're the first in this year, and a leader by all accounts. So welcome to this live stream.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm honored to be the first speaker to kick off 2021. Thank you.
Wonderful, Shahira. And you and I have always had a fantastic relationship and conversation, actually, continued dialogue on various things. And so why don't we start off by telling people about your organization and what you do?
Yeah, thank you. So Yayasan Hasanah, Yayasan means foundation, by the way, in Malay. So the Hasnah Foundation is started off, we're fairly young, but we built on the legacy of over 10 years of corporate philanthropy contributions. We were set up in 2015 to streamline the sort of value distribution work of Khazanah National in Asia. So we look at 5 different pillars, education being our largest, sort of 60% of our funding goes to education. But we also look into issues of community development and community leadership, environmental conservation, arts, and research. So very happy to be here, because looking forward for the conversation.
And so, Shahira, tell us a little bit about the education sector in Malaysia itself, given that a lot of your work is in that sector. So give us some contours so that we can understand the size of it, the shape of it,
Sure.
how many schools, how many teachers, that kind of thing. If you could give us some statistics, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so we have about 10,220 schools in Malaysia, right? population of about 30 million people, right? And comprises about close to 5 million students in both primary and secondary school, and covering about 450,000 teachers. So that's kind of the size of the landscape that we're talking about. And then just to share with you a little experience in 2020, like most of us all over the world, our schools were also closed in March for about 2 or 3 months, for almost 4 months, completely closed. And obviously, like many of us that experienced that moment, trying to figure out how to provide learning to students. And then school opened again in July, and in that period, I think the Ministry of Education looked at new SOP, or the new way of going back. So it was very new to students. For example, everyone had to wear masks, the physical distancing, the social distancing, and things like having lunch at your desk, so they can no longer go to the canteen. So there were a lot of adjustments, and the class size was also reduced drastically. So, for perspective, a Malaysian classroom would be about anywhere between 35 to 45 kids in class, and in some schools it goes up to 50 students in the classroom. So you could imagine the resource and the capacity that was needed. And then school shut down again in November, and they're still out of school, and school is now reopening in January, on January 20th. And the ministry has just announced 2 days ago that kids are all now asked to come back to school physically. So if you imagine the Malaysian situation now, parents, teachers, everyone are kind of wrapping their head around, should I send my kids to school? Is there a blended way of learning? Do parents choose whether they want to send their kids to school or not? That's where we are as we start the year today, Vikas.
Wow, and I mean, give you an example in the UK. What we do know is the effects of the pandemic on the community, as I call it. It has been quite significant. Where I read a statistic on the weekend actually saying that nearly 50% of all head teachers in the UK are considering resigning and retirement, simply because they're burnt out and just fed up with this situation in terms of how the pandemic has really arrested the system. And so from your perspective, how do you make headway, or how do you make heads or tails of this in Malaysia? Is it the same kind of effect? Are teachers and school leaders approaching it differently? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So I think the fatigue is real for everyone, including administrators, I suppose, from the Ministry of Education, trying to kind of just wrap their head around this and figure this out. In the past few months, at least in the last 10 months of last year, quite a lot of our interventions were supporting teachers in building teacher confidence on digital learning, just going back to basics in terms of how do you connect through Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, and convening teachers so they could change ideas in terms of how they're delivering teaching and learning. And as you've seen this a lot. All of this also depends on school and teacher leadership. So we've seen some schools doing really well with different types of innovation, because, and I mean, we've got rural schools, we've got urban schools, but we've got urban poor schools, and we've got teachers who are actually in some parts of the country going house to house, and that's just different types of stories that you hear about teacher dedication, and I'm sure you've heard quite a lot of that. WhatsApp seemed to be very active because digital connectivity is difficult. So teachers have started to become really innovative. They're like, okay, and teachers have also been very flexible with their students. So it's not like a one size fit all. okay, if you can't come online now, it's recorded, you can watch it anytime at your convenience. It's those kind of adaptability that we're seeing. But yeah, so I think quite a lot of 2021 now is focused on, I mean, we've heard a lot of this where um, education challenges, we've spoken about the importance of exams, spoken about digitalization of education, and that a lot of this got accelerated. And really, that seemed to be the scenario here in Malaysia as well, because the Ministry of Education now is looking at a longer term view for digital education and a blended approach to education. So quite a lot of that conversation is going on. Um, yeah.
So obviously, Shahira, I agree with you. I think this whole subject about technology in education has obviously been given, a new lease of life in terms of conversation, at least, as to how education systems grapple with the use of technology in this hybrid reality. But I wanted to ask you also, in terms of, you've been a great partner of T4 through our events and supporting that. What else do you see as the silver linings, or as we called in the first event, the new normal for education in Malaysia, given everything that we've experienced in the last 7, 8, 9 months? Before you answer that, though, let me tell you a little bit more in terms of I've been thinking about this thematic about commitment in particular. And so what happens is that when a shock comes to the system, we all go into reactive mode, right? Trying to deal with it. And we're constantly chasing our tails, we feel, regards to all these different issues. But given that the pandemic has been here now for 7, 8, 9 months, we've become better at absorbing those shocks, and actually we've become better at understanding actually how things play out. And so what I am proposing for this year, at least, to think about as a messaging platform is this idea that we need to think about, given the circumstances that we're going through, what new commitments we should be making as a sector to make sure that we not only catch up, but we actually use this opportunity to reimagine education. So I call it a commitment to action 2.0, because we're not talking about a recommitment, we're talking about fresh new commitments. So in that light, having told you that, what do you think the new normal will be, and what commitments need we make that are new and fresh, that actually take up the opportunity that's in front of us?
Right. The pandemic obviously has given us a good opportunity for reset, depending on how we want to view or do reset, right? And how much of it do we want to leverage and harness, or how much of it do we want, as much as possible, to go back to how it was? Now, there has been quite a lot of issues around challenges or gaps in the education system in the past that many have been trying to, promote. For example, simple things, teacher, pedagogical intervention, 21st century learning and education, preparing for jobs for the future, and so on and so forth. So quite a lot of that, I think we need to take stock, I think, and review and take this opportunity for reset in terms of what can happen. Let me share with you a couple of things. For Malaysia, I think one of the I just wanted, before we go on the opportunities, just the acceleration of the digital access and accessibility. So given that, the biggest sector of population that has been impacted are the children with the whole, so because with the private sector, I mean, this is accelerated, but for those, the rural areas, so there has been a new and urgent priority by government to ensure digital access for all Malaysians by 2023. So this is something that is going to get accelerated. We have some statistics right now. They said MOE has indicated that about 37% of students do not have any appropriate e-learning services or devices. while internet penetration is really good in Malaysia, but not all of them are suitable. So, if you think about computer and smartphone ownership, which is about 71%, 93%, but not all of them are suitable for e-learning. And broadband penetration is also very low. So I think the first thing that has happened is the urgent priority now by government and investment in ensuring that digital connectivity becomes available for all. On the education, there were a couple of things. I think there are a couple of things really. Now, if you think about uh, government investments, I will take on the future in two ways, because if I may, one is more on the policy side, because quite largely huge policy interventions and changes need to happen. And secondly, what private sector and corporate philanthropy can, and they can do quite a lot, but the policy needs to support it. Um, you know, Globally, I think a percentage of GDP that is spent on education is around 2 to 4%, roughly, right? Is there an opportunity now for that to increase? You know, if you look at how we should be looking at curriculum, schools, even school scheduling, education model, accessibility, jobs for the future. Should the government be taking this opportunity really to reset and look at how can we be prioritizing government spending for the future. In the past, it has been very, brick and mortar, those kind of things. Even teacher salaries, for example, I think there's a huge opportunity now to look at the sector professionally. I mean, you speak about teachers wanting to resign and feeling quite tired about the whole struggle. Is this a good opportunity for us to look at how education can be performed or given in a cheaper way, in a much more effective way? So these are some of the kind of pieces of work that we are working closely with MOE. As you know, we've been working with the Ministry of Education for our Trustful program in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Which look at, 4 areas: pedagogical intervention, school leadership, parental engagement, um, and student potential. So these were the 4 areas that we've been working on, and there's a lot of learning on those on that pilot from the private sector. And is there something that we can look at for the future? So we are spending quite a lot of time at the policy level, together with the Ministry of Education, and from the programmatic side and on the philanthropy side, there are just so many things that's going on to support immediate and midterm needs.
And so, Shahira, in terms of, thank you for that overview. I think in terms of, well, as a philanthropic organization, you're outside of the state sector, kind of, but not really, right? Because of your heritage. What is the role of philanthropy in these times?
It is. I have always said that we saw the best of philanthropy in 2020. Really, we saw civil society, private sector coming together in such ways that we could have never imagined. Even for Hasanah, last year was a record year in so many ways. It was a record year from the amount of money we disbursed, highest ever. A number of projects that we supported, highest ever. Total number of people that were supported, people in need that were supported. And so I think and collaboration with government accelerated, because we all realized, we all knew it, but we all know we can't work alone. But 2020 forced us all to work much closer together. Trust was accelerated, partnerships were accelerated, even trust with partners, trust a government with corporate and private sector, government with civil society and NGOs. All of that just happened. And I think that we saw quite a lot of that For us specifically, because we will be looking more at partnerships and collaboration this year. Last year, for the first time ever, we received funding from the Ministry of Finance to help deploy funding because the government machinery was quite loaded, and more aid needed to go to go to the ground, and MOF provided us some funds to deploy. So that was first ever. Typically, usually we go and lobby for different things during a national budget, but this time it came because the need was there. So that's one. Secondly, give you another example of partnership between philanthropy and government. Um, the Ministry of Finance also announced in the national budget last year for Hasnah to oversee an implementation of providing laptop devices and connectivity to 150,000 kids all over the country. And that's a collaborative effort by the private sector. We are like the secretariat and will be leading that effort. And really, I think the idea there is that allow the private sector to carry the pilot. I mean, basically pay for the tuition fees kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Look at different models of giving out devices, a lease model, what kind of ownership model, school criteria, what are the device specifications, what are the connectivity specifications, and we'll be modeling all of that in the next few months, rolling out about 150,000 devices to students to fulfill an immediate need, but also capture learnings for ongoing digital learning for the country in the future. So this is something that we're doing. So I think partnership collaborations are something that we could do. Private sector do give speed in execution, efficiency in execution, and that's something that we could work together with government to help support, and then capture the learnings, because obviously government has larger, more complex implementation delivery to do.
So you have been an exceptional leader in these times. Even I, sitting from afar, can see that, and everything you have said also points to that. I mean, so what I'm also keen on using these opportunities to talk about, given again your position and what you have demonstrated, what are the leadership lessons that other people can learn that you've seen that actually that are useful and insightful for teachers around the world? I'd love for you to tell us about 3 such leadership lessons from your experience that actually are the most important.
I think key leadership lessons, one of the things that has always struck as I reflect 2020 was balancing trust and implementation. So, because things were happening and we needed to kind of hit ground running. So as we think about partnership and collaboration, I think we need to think about building trust, leaving the ego at the door, for example, and those kind of things. What are some of the enablers for partnership and collaboration? And what are the barriers to partnership and collaboration is something that all corporate philanthropy leaders really need to think about. What is getting in the way for collaboration? Because there's no way that we could solve this problem alone. Is branding getting in the way? Who gets recognition? Are these little things getting in the way for collaboration? It's not worth it, right? So seriously, I think about that. I think from the context of education, I think 2 things come to mind. And I think we need to think about that. One is the focus and the importance of mental health. I think this, gets forgotten or gets bucketed elsewhere. So I would say that as we look at our interventions in the education space, not just for students, but also for teachers' mental well-being are also actually very badly affected. I mean, one of our flagship programs is for school counselors, retraining of school counselors. And one day, one of the counselors said, we, the counselors, also need counseling and support, so we're training them how to be more effective to the students. But actually, like you said, the teachers are carrying a lot of load. So I mean, leadership lesson is really, I would call on everyone to think about barriers to collaboration in a very honest, authentic, genuine way, and remove it and start looking at working in a more collaborative way in the sector, because it's the only way forward, actually.
Well, Shahira, on that note, I have nothing but praise because you have been very supportive of T4 and all of our endeavors and many of my harebrained ideas for years now. And so thank you so much for partnering with me on that, on all these various initiatives and issues.
It's been a pleasure, Vikas.
No, it's been a pleasure also working with you and your team. Shahira, thank you so much for participating. And please know that sometime later this year, I'd love to have you back on this so we can again talk about and reflect on what you have said today in terms of what the opportunities are, because I do think that there is a real possibility that these silver linings or these opportunities for paradigm shift can easily pass us by. And so it requires leaders like yourself to actually make sure that things happen on the ground. So thank you for everything that you do, and many congratulations for the work of your organization. I look forward to many years of continued collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Vikas.
Not at all. Bye-bye.